rise, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If the clerk would make roll call.
President Epling,
Here.
Vice Chair Donato,
Here.
Mr. Piper,
Here.
Mr. Martin,
Here.
Mr. St. Clair,
Here.
Mr. Steele,
Here.
Mr. Steep.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks. Said it twice.
Do we have any corrections to the minutes? Anybody would like to suggest? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? If anybody is here that might stand up and answer questions from us, please stand up, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that any statements you give this evening will be true to the best of your knowledge? Okay. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda. Just for note, there was correspondence on the first case that's in front of you, and I believe that was emailed as well. And I just want to make sure that all of the board is using their microphones. That way we can make sure that we pick up a good recording for people that are watching online.
All right, case number 1.
This is a request for fence variance for the property at 4785 River Run Drive. The house in question is shown on the screen on the southwest corner of Stony Brook Court and River Run Drive. This gives you more of a close-up of the rear yard where we're talking about the fencing. In general, we're looking at the portion of the fence code that deals with secondary frontage on a second street. In general, the code allows for the fencing to encroach halfway beyond the building line, but there are stipulations in the code as far as the design. Again, the applicant, is noted in your packet, is looking at the portion in the blue bubble is where we're looking at the variances. There's some images submitted by the applicant, so this gives you a view toward the cul-de-sac in Stony Brook, so you can see the general area along the house and the sidewalk where the fencing would be located. This gives you a view of the neighboring property as well as the general area where the fence would make a turn and go down the side yard with the adjacent property. These are also images looking along the street and then the corner of the house where the fence would extend out toward the sidewalk. And another view back toward the cul-de-sac bulb. The applicant submitted 3 separate options. The first option, which we're calling option A, would basically place the fence 6 feet from the sidewalk. The right-of-way in this case is actually the center of the sidewalk, so the setback would be 8 feet. We've added a graphic to the bottom of the screen to generally show the approximate location of where that fencing would be placed based on the option. Our major concern with the options submitted is ensuring that the proposed fencing does not screen off or provide a visible barrier to the adjacent property. The second option, option B, has a variable setback, but generally places the fencing outside of the landscaping. And again, we have a graphic in the corner that shows approximately where that would be. And then the third option, option C, is another variation that would pull the fencing back behind some of the front landscaping, the small arborvitae, as shown in the picture in the corner as well. Staff finds that the corner lot's uniquely impacted by the cul-de-sac bulb, unlike some other cases in the past which we put in your packet where you were looking at a rectangular lot. This is one where the backyard, because of the cul-de-sac shape, is constricted. The staff finds that, there are extenuating circumstances. However, we also need to take into account the impact on the adjacent property. So staff put into your packet a fourth option, the staff proposal, where we were looking at the right-of-way line in the center of the sidewalk, the building line, which is at 25 feet, and then the midpoint, which would be allowed by code at 12.5 feet. We're proposing an option that would basically kind of meet various aspects of the code to the extent possible. So looking to meet the 12.5 foot mark outside of the main tree, but then to taper that back to the building line so that there's more of a view corridor toward the front of the adjacent house. So staff finds that the corner lot's impacted by the cul-de-sac and the original placement of the home. The variances should be carefully considered, but given the potential impacts, we think that there is a compromised location, as we've indicated, for the fence that would meet the general spirit and the intent of the code. As well, we're also looking at the fact that the code requires an open ornamental wrought iron type of fence when you're forward of that secondary building line. In this case, we're kind of finding a compromised location that would allow for a 5-foot board-on-board fence to be utilized as an alternative. So with that, we would recommend approval with 4 conditions as noted on the screen.
Can you clarify where, so the staff is saying draw the line at 12.5 feet?
We're saying that where it turns the corner is indicated in the yellow line, that we would look at, I'll see if I can get it on a screen behind you here. I've got a pointer. So we're looking at meeting the code at the property line, but then allowing them to go to the 12.5 foot line, which is allowed by code if you do an ornamental wrought iron style fence that's 4 feet tall. In this case, they're proposing the 5-foot board on board, and given the existing landscaping and how they're trying to fit that in there, we're looking at this general placement as a compromise that would meet the intent of the code as much as possible.
So is the yellow line what staff is proposing?
Exactly. Yep. This is the staff option. The 3 previous that were in green were the 3 options submitted by the applicant.
So if the yellow line was behind the 25-foot line, there would be no reason for a variance on the location?
Correct.
Sorry. Is an example, a sample picture of the fence you said is wrought iron, or has there been anything submitted on that?
No, we don't have a detail, but based on the information submitted with the application, they're looking for a 5-foot board on board.
Oh, board on board. Okay.
And so as part of the conditions, we're looking at that to be conditioned as being uniform for the entire fence so that, there's not a change in styles.
Where does Max live? I mean, is he impacted by this? Is he just across the street or something?
That I don't know for sure.
Is it unusual for the right-of-way line to run directly through the center of the sidewalk rather than for the sidewalk to be within the right-of-way?
Yes, it is, and we looked at the street plans when the subdivision was originally constructed. Normally, that right-of-way line would be a foot behind the sidewalk, but for whatever reason, in this case, it was right down the center.
So the variance is really 2 parts. One is the style of fence, and the second is the location of the fence.
The style of fence, the height of the fence forward of the building line, and then the location. So in this case, instead of the wrought iron that's required by code, looking to do the board on board, the code requires the 4 feet forward of the building line They're proposing a 5-foot board-on-board, so an additional 12 inches.
Is board-on-board a privacy fence?
Not technically, because it's not 100% screened. There are gaps in it, so it doesn't, in our code, fall, directly into a privacy fence definition.
Is that the staggered there, here, here, here?
Generally, that's how that's defined, yes.
So if you went back to the applicant's options, I mean, would a board-on-board fence, I guess maybe not. I was wondering if it would obstruct, any views coming out of the driveway on either side. Maybe it wouldn't, I don't know, but it seems like it could obstruct some view.
Particularly with option A, that has the potential to block views. When we look at the other two options, those are kind of compromises that the applicant's proposing. We don't necessarily think there's an issue with driveway visibility on option B. Our bigger concern with that is the way that it turns the corner. It's blocking the front facade or the visibility of the adjacent property. And kind of the same thing with this option. It's trying to follow the sidewalk or the cul-de-sac layout. And in doing so, it's actually limiting visibility to the adjacent house. So we're more concerned about that particular issue and the impact on, adverse impact on the adjacent property, which is why we're kind of, proposing a modification to that would still keep that view corridor open.
Yeah, because if you have some cars parked along that cul-de-sac like you see right here with this one, if you would have a couple other cars and then the fence pushed up,
What's the view issue? Is it so people can view the neighboring house, or so that people pulling out of the driveway can view the cul-de-sac? Or
Yes, the original intent of the code as it's written to allow fencing forward of the building line on that secondary frontage, it's done in a manner when council established that portion of the code and made the fence code more flexible. They chose wrought iron and the height so that you would maintain visibility, a view corridor along the street. So our big concern is making sure that we maintain the intent of that. But given the circumstance that, we find a compromise that might be workable.
So the owner can currently do a 4-foot wrought iron up to the 12.5-foot line?
They could do, yes, they could do the wrought iron up to this point. But again, then you get into the definition issue in the code. When you turn the corner, because you're forward of here, you need to do wrought iron. So you're looking at 2 additional sides that would have to be the wrought iron. So given this situation, that's why we're suggesting, if it's, open to the board that, that consider the 5-foot board on board as kind of a compromise in this particular case because of the cul-de-sac layout.
Any other questions for staff?
Was there conversation about, it looks like there's the large tree is an evergreen. Is that correct in my understanding? So we're trying to encompass the evergreen inside of the fence line. But if the evergreen was on the outside of the fence line, it really would be no issue.
If the fence was located behind the evergreen, to a large extent, you'd be complying with code because to be on the backside of that tree, you would be at the building line.
Was there conversations about that solution, or was that not considered an alternative?
No, our understanding is that the owner's trying to get a little bit extra space because of the constriction of the backyard due to the house placement. So given that, we were looking at it in terms of visibility. Putting the fence forward of that particular tree, would allow for landscaping within the backyard, but then turning that corner immediately and heading toward the building line at the side property line would keep that view corridor open to the adjacent property.
Okay, so you offered At least two other, June 16th of 22 and July 21 of 22. Apparently cases that were similar.
Right, we had a total of 3 cases that were noted in your packet. 2 of those, they were proposing to do larger privacy fences forward of the building line. Those were cases where we had a rectangular lot. They didn't have any of the site constraints that the cul-de-sac placement provides on this property. The third was the Tom residence, where they actually had the green inside of the street and also the bike path situation. So they had a much larger setback. They already had existing landscaping to some extent, sort of like this case, where there's already trees and shrubs in place that, could be utilized to help screen or kind of, lessen the impact of the fencing.
Yeah, we approved that one, I think, yeah.
Okay. We need to get the applicant up here, if you don't mind. And can you state your name and address for the record?
Sean Hall, 4785 River Run Drive.
Okay. So tell us your take on the staff recommendation here.
So, I mean, we have a very mobile 1-year-old, and like right now, going out in the front yard, he's like darting towards streets and stuff. And so the landscaping is actually about 5 years old, because we did that for privacy several years ago, but obviously that doesn't keep a 1-year-old inside, inside the property. We actually do have deed restrictions saying that has to be wood or stone fence, which is the reason for the wood fence versus something else. And then the privacy fence, just because we're right off of Davidson. There's people frequently pop in the neighborhood, use the cul-de-sac as a turnaround, things like that. So privacy for us, but also privacy for our son as well.
Any questions for the applicant?
Oh, the staff plan is acceptable to you, their proposal?
Any of them are acceptable. They're better than the alternative of having to chop off a third of our yard to be able to have.
But you'd rather have option A, is that right?
The more space for him to be able to play, obviously the better. But
So the difference, but we're talking between option A and the staff is just those arborvitae's right there in the front. We're not talking a ton of extra space there.
Do you see it advantageous to have the evergreen on the inside of the fence than the outside of the fence?
if you put the fence on the inside, then it doesn't look like a lot of space. But when you're in the backyard, that's chopping off a significant corner of there, because that evergreen has grown to probably 10-foot diameter size. So if you put that on the other side, then it's
And that's just going to get bigger.
yeah, I think it's calmed down a bit. But,
So it's going to, when you think about the placement of the fence line now, with the future growth of this tree, it's going to push out. It's going to.
yeah. I mean, and that's another reason to give some space, but to support that growth, obviously.
So, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
I'm
Okay. Are you going to have this professionally installed, or is it something that you and some friends are going to do, or what's the plan here?
Based on the amount that wood has gone up in price the past 4 years, I would like to install it myself, but I don't have the expertise to do that. So I've talked to a professional. He came out and help with some of the lines and gave estimates.
And so depending on how we vote, you understand the staff recommendations, and you agree with the 4 stipulations that they put on their recommendations. Have you seen this, I guess?
I don't know if I've seen this slide, but just looking at it quickly, it seems.
Because it's important. We don't want somebody to to think that they have a variance and they go do something and they don't understand the conditions that are put out there if approval is voted upon.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that those were the plan. I think for board on board, we were, I think all of the wooden fences in the neighborhood are planks right up against each other, not overlapping planks.
Well, and then the uniform height thing, as the, land will rise or there'll be a depression, so, that uniform height thing, the fence can't all of a sudden just,
Yeah, the plan was 5 feet all around. Yep.
All right, thank you.
This is a very unique lot, it seems like. Would staff have any objection to just drawing the line at 12 and a half feet?
Moving the fence line up to 12 and a half feet?
Yeah, just allowing him to go to the middle line.
That was C, option C.
Is that C?
Yes.
No.
No, because C's variable.
It's a little, I think, a little variation on.
These 15, 13, and 15, so
13, 15, and I can't read that.
here it's 15, 3, 12, 9, and then 15. I wrote it down.
In your opinion, would...
Go back to C, if you could, option C. That's the 15.
So that's 12.9 to 15.3.
Yeah, 15, 3, 12, 9.
That one, I have no problem with that one.
I would think that from the cul-de-sac view, being able to see the evergreen and allow the evergreen to grow on the outside of the fence would be a better solution, because you're really kind of encumbering that evergreen on two sides, where if you brought that fence in and allowed the evergreen to grow on the outside, one, it's going to conceal a heck of a lot of the fence, and two, it's not going to create, as the evergreen grows, it's not going to be a problem with the fence. Do you think that it would look better from the cul-de-sac to have the evergreen on the outside, or do you think that you'd rather see the evergreen on the inside? Help me understand your perspective.
I think you'd run into the same problem with the fence on the inside. You just have the evergreen growing into the side of your fence that way.
I think the amount of impact between the fence and the evergreen is limited on if we bring it back. Where we're kind of hitting it on two sides. If the fence is on the outside, we're really hitting it only on about a quarter of the circumference of the tree if it's brought in. It's just in my opinion.
I think his main concern is the amount of space that you lose if you bring that fence inside that evergreen.
Right. I agree. Absolutely. You can see the red line going through the edge of the evergreen already, so then we'd have to put it even further inside of the building line to.
That cut out a third of the front yard. Yeah.
Are you putting a gate up there at the top of, from the driveway? Is that where the gate's going to go in? Also?
Yeah, I mean, when I talked with the fence company, the intent was to put one on that vertical yellow line.
Got it.
And then also another one in the backyard.
Somebody asked about if we'd be comfortable having let me go up to here, having the fence at this point.
I guess I didn't need to know your comfort. It was just, visibility concerns.
Right, so we do have a concern. So this point is actually inside this neighbor's wall extended. So having it here, you're outside of that. And that's just one of the things you look at for corner lots generally, and why that original code section was included. But like you mentioned, I don't remember any other lot that has this similar situation. We've had them where it curves a little bit or it angles a little bit, but not with the cul-de-sac bulb that close to the first property line. But that's the one thing that we were looking at, is the view out of that window on that side. Mm-hmm.
Is there a window there?
Yeah, that's the living room.
Okay.
And I think, from a real estate standpoint, on that neighbor's house, if you have somebody looking to buy that house and you're looking out that front window and you're just looking at a fence,
That's gonna hurt your value.
Well, that neighbor had notice of this hearing, too,
agreed.
and the opportunity to come.
Yeah, and if that particular corner is a problem, we were also contemplating where that thin yellow line intersects with the red line, basically stopping the fence there, because we didn't realize until like we started doing some, not professional surveying, that like our property line goes all the way over there. I think our former owners assumed that the property line was kind of where the mulch bed is now, so we might decide to be good neighbors and just kind of give them that chunk of the yard, because if you put a fence up there, you have a 3-4 foot chunk of yard that,
Moving this line this way,
yes.
how much?
I think it's somewhere around 3 to 4 feet.
And Max is the house next to there, right?
Max is on the other side of the cul-de-sac, straight north. Because he's actually in a similar position to us of,
All right.
So you're the guinea pig, and then,
well, he texted, me, he's like, well, if I send something nice, will they approve mine later on? So I said, sure, make me the guinea pig.
He can't put wrought iron in. You can't put wrought iron in, right?
Yeah, fences or walls shall be constructed of wood or stone only, and in no event shall chain link or other metal,
That's an HOA restriction.
a deed restriction.
Does that circumvent the zoning code?
It adds to it.
No, well, I mean, it's independent of the zoning code, but you're at risk. For example, if he submitted a fence permit to us for something other than what the deed restriction allows, so like for a wrought iron style fence, but it was completely behind his house in an appropriate location, we would have to issue the permit, even though we know it violates the deed restriction, because those are independent.
Okay, that makes sense.
So
Then he's subject to somebody in his neighborhood filing in court, and he'd have, if he's violating a deed restriction, he may have to remove it.
let me ask you this, taking into account what you just mentioned about that coming up 3 or 4 feet in from the back of the property line, option C, which would, follow the curve of the cul-de-sac back to, so that's basically it there, right? So that, is this green line moving it up, correct?
He's moved it up to the mulch
Yeah,
bed.
so that's taking care of the line of sight from the neighbor's house? Correct?
pretty close.
He's moved that 3 feet from staff recommendations. Over.
Are you saying it moving it further from where that green line is?
Go back to the last slide you were on. It showed the yellow. Yeah,
That.
so option C moves it up here, correct? Yes.
Well, I'm not sure if that green line there is supposed to be on the property line, or is it supposed to be X number of feet inside the property line? It doesn't say on there.
It's on the mulch bed, which is multiple feet in from the property line, from my understanding.
Yeah, you can see the grass.
Oh, yeah, that is inside.
Yeah, considerably.
I mean, I would be a lot more comfortable with that,
I like C.
bringing that up to,
Well, at least that fence line location on, not necessarily the front, but.
Well, that solves some of the.
Now I'm getting confused.
It does, it's all, but Carson, is your street view on option C, is that the same street view as what the city's proposing, or is that street? No. Okay, it's different.
Not.
So the street view you're showing on option C matches option C.
it just takes it, so it takes the fence further back.
Yeah, I'm looking at the street
You can't see
view.
the whole curve because of the
Yeah.
pine tree there.
10-foot difference.
Okay.
When you go to the staff recommendations, what is that little yellow line at the very top?
Somebody measured that, do we know what that
Do you see
measurement
that,
is?
see that yellow line up there?
That was just an initial measurement
Okay.
that happens to be on the aerial that we pulled down.
So somebody knows what that measurement is if we,
That goes right in line with the mulch bed, though.
If you're referring to this one right here, that's really not relevant. It's just something that we were using to kind of gauge the distances when we were trying to figure out the right-of-way.
Well, is the distance 12.2 feet, isn't that to that yellow line?
Yes,
Yeah, that line is 12.2 feet
from the edge of,
from the property line.
from the edge of the sidewalk,
Oh, coming this way.
correct, from that point to that point. But then we determined that the right-of-way was actually the center of the sidewalk, so that's not relevant to the discussion at that point, yeah.
This is why we decided to do landscaping 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So this seemed like a very unique, complicated situation.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I have one question, if you don't mind. Would you prefer option C or the staff recommendation?
I mean, the extra like strip of grass at the back, I mean, it seems a little petty just to like take off a chunk of yard that you know, they've kind of assumed was theirs.
Did you come up with the option A, B, and C?
Yes, those were my poor graphical drawings of
so who's cutting that strip of grass between you and the neighbor's house behind your arborvitae's?
the neighbor.
Okay, so he's assuming that's his anyway.
Yeah, I mean, he
even though it's-
hires it out, but yeah, they're cutting that.
Does he know that that's his?
It's not.
That's yours, I mean?
I assume not until probably, because the fencing guy came and like put some flags in the yard and, but yeah, I assume he wasn't aware.
What would you estimate this distance?
2-3 feet?
That's what I think too. I mean, yeah, probably not enough to get a mower through.
No, not much. And
Is that a retaining wall around that tree? Is that?
it's like it's a small, like probably a foot tall, like
Yeah.
holding the mulch in. And at the backside there, actually, they also have like a garden that I think if you followed that yellow line, you'd kind of build a fence up into their garden that they don't use, but it's like, there's also a small like kind of decorative wall over there too.
So if this line moves up here, you're good with that, you think that would make your neighbor happy? And then this point, would this point come back to here?
No, it goes
It
up.
goes up,
That-
goes up.
Up to the middle, red line.
Because, so this point doesn't transfer to here, it goes up to there.
Yeah, because at that point, you're having to kind of snake the fence through the landscaping. There's about 5 evergreens along there, so like underneath where that little white, yeah, so right where the kind of white label is, that's the last evergreen. So then if you kind of slide the fence between the evergreen and then there's a river birch in between the evergreen and those arborvitaes.
So this location means you eliminate all this landscaping, right?
The intent was to kind of like have that landscaping on the outside of the fence, because there's enough room around the river birch to be able to kind of slide it.
Right, so this would stay back here.
No. It would move up to the red line.
Oh, the landscaping is inside the fence or outside the fence? No, I'm talking about this landscaping right there.
It's outside.
But if we take this line up to here, it's not.
Yeah, it is. The river birch and those arborvitaes will be outside of it.
Okay, Thank you very much.
That would be helpful to include in a motion if the location with respect to those known points, because you're not gonna have the aerial photo and a survey aren't always exact, so those lines are estimates based on
Yep.
that aerial. So it would be helpful to,
Describe it,
To describe
describe.
in a motion?
yeah,
placement.
or motion or conditions, either way, yeah.
Okay. I'll make a motion. And if anybody wants to modify this, please say so before it is seconded. I move to approve, wait, I'm on the wrong. I move to approve a variance from Hilliard Code Section 1121.02D1I to reduce the setback along a secondary front line from 12.5 to 5 feet, to increase the permitted fence height from 48 inches to 60 inches, and to permit a wooden board-on-board fence in lieu of an aluminum wrought iron design. And actually, that 5 feet, from 12.5 to 5 feet was a mistake. Correct. My motion is that the fence be substantially located as described in the staff recommendation, and that it be subject to the 4 conditions in the staff recommendation. And that's my motion.
So we're making a motion to approve the staff plan for the
Yes.
fence,
Yellow
not
line.
option C.
Yes.
Okay, I'll second that.
Well,
Wait a minute.
I want to
I don't want to.
get some opinions on my motion.
Okay.
So you're talking about this yellow line
Yeah.
is what you're approving, not option C, which moves it in from the neighbors. Because he's already said the neighbor's taking care of that grass behind those arborvitaes in his backyard. So that's already assumed that the neighbor takes care of that.
Yeah, but I mean, you can still move those shrubs, and I mean, and you don't have to build it all the way to that line. You can build it inside that line.
Well, I would request that we locate the fence line at the edge of the mulch bed line on that plane.
Well, under my motion, he has that option
Okay.
to do that, but he also can move it out to the edge of his property, and that is his property. I think he ought to be able to go to the edge of it. But he doesn't have to. If he wants to let his neighbor continue mowing it, that's fine.
And then could we also stipulate that the landscaping, that the arborvitae that is all paralleling the sidewalk be on the outside of the fence?
The 3 trees, is that, or the 3 pine?
Is that the river birch? And the 5 along the back are going to be inside the fence, but the ones along the sidewalk will be outside of the fence.
I think it's clear from the image of the staff proposal that those are outside of the line.
Agreed.
So I don't know that we need to stipulate that, and it could be a problem if we said that those have to be outside, and what if they die? Then does he have to plant more, or, you know?
Okay.
Any other critiques? No. Okay. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
President Epling,
Yes.
Vice President Donato,
Yes.
Mr. Piper,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
No.
Mr. St. Clair,
No.
Mr. Steele,
Yes?
Mr. Steep,
Yes.
motion carries 5-2.
All right. So do you understand which one we just passed here? And what your options are with that? Okay, all right.
The staff plan, right?
So we passed the yellow line, but you have the option to move that yellow line up to your, I mean, anywhere really, but, with the thought of moving that up to the edge of your mulch bed there, instead of having it back against your property line.
Yes, so you can have it inside, but you can also have it go all the way to the edge of your property.
Who's going to explain this to the fencing contractor?
All they have to see is that picture, right?
What's the permit going to say?
Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna get this on a survey. And we will work with the applicant on getting that transposed onto a survey so that the fence contractor has a better idea of that. We can work with them on getting measurements, so this point, right, the build line, somewhere along here, he can be at the build line and then angle from here, basically around this evergreen, right? So what we can do is find these two approximate points inside these trees, outside this tree, and from this point to this number. But we will show that on the survey with his fence permit. So we'll have to work with him on getting that drawn correctly.
Right, so it's going to be surveyed, but they have the option to move it.
Yeah, this represents the farthest out from the house it can be, yep.
I just be clear, the reason I voted no, because I don't like the ambiguity of where that can be. I understand it's the property line but, okay.
All right. Thank you for your time. Case 2.
So this is a request for a proposed development on Weaver Court North. The site's outlined on the screen in the blue bubble. As you can see, it's heavily wooded with scrub. It's been undeveloped, so this is one of the last 2 parcels on the street to develop. What's being proposed is a reduction in the tree replacement for the site. Originally, this was platted in 1978. At some point, these 2 lots were combined, and recently the Planning Commission approved a lot split to split those back out to the original parcels. So the applicant's looking to develop this residual piece, which is the original lot number 20 here at the top. What's proposed with the M1 zoning is a series of buildings that'll have flex office type uses. As you'll note on the plan, there's existing retention and that will be expanded. This site actually does regional detention for this as well as the property to the south. And there are a number of very significant easements on this property. So basically everything from the back side of the existing pond in this location, you can see all the dash lines. These are all easements which preclude the ability for them to plant trees. There are also easements down both of the side property lines, and there are actually multiple easements on the back of the property as well, adjacent to the residential development. What's proposed is to create buildings that'll have a number of suites. So this is something that the comprehensive plan supports so that we can actually accommodate businesses as they're growing within the city. The Planning Commission recently, just last week, approved the site plan for this. So these are just some images of the architecture with what's being proposed and some prototypes for the materials that will be used, as well as for screening and dumpsters. What's in your packet is a very detailed tree survey, so you can see they actually went out and mapped out every single tree on the site that was 6 inches or greater. You also received in your packet a full report that listed all of the conditions, the size, all of the details of each of the individual trees. So in terms of the results of that, this particular site had 2,442 inches that are protected by the code. 99 of those will not be impacted by the construction. So in general, we're looking at 2343 is the total to be removed. When you do the 50% reduction that's allowed by code, that gets us down to 1172 inches. And of note, while it's not identified or spelled out in the code, the applicant did note that there are 182 inches that are invasive or banned species, as well as 583 that are dead or dying or in poor condition. So if you take that into account, we're looking at, still looking at 406.5 inches. What's requested is a variance to reduce this to 150 inches, which would be the equivalent of 75 2-inch caliper trees. And like I said, this is a case that's pretty unique. It's substantial. The code gives that 50% reduction when you get over 30 inches per acre. This is well beyond that. So what's being proposed at the 150, something that we looked at with the city arborist. Even if you wanted to plant all of those trees, you can't do that on site. There just is not a physical way to do that, given all of the different easements that are involved in the property. So the applicant is actually working with staff and is making it available that any of the trees that can't be planted on site could be used for street trees or put into public parks or open spaces. And in your packet as well, just to note, the variance that was given to Amazon for their recent site development, when you look at the per acre number of inches, Amazon came out to 6.3. The applicant here is proposing to do 10.5 inches per acre. So we feel that what they're proposing is a good accommodation given all of the issues that are involved. And then when you take into account that they're looking to provide some of those trees for public benefit, if they can't safely, for the health of the trees, put those on the site, we think that's a fair accommodation. So given all of those issues, the landscape plan will need to be revised when they come in for permits, but the staff is comfortable that what they're asking for meets the spirit and the intent of the code. This has significant limitations on the site that if you applied the code would make the site fairly undevelopable. So the replacement that they're requesting, is one that's going to protect the health of the trees, and we would recommend approval with the 6 conditions.
Is the issue here that there are so many trees on this lot or this place, and the code says that you can only remove half? And so if there were fewer trees already, they could remove half of those and maybe even have more space.
Yeah, this is a case where we've had, I don't know, half a dozen or so over the years, where a site that is so full of trees that it's not a reasonable way to develop it in full compliance with the code. The number of replacement trees would just be so high. In those cases, in each case, the board has approved a reduction. And what we try to do is get what's a reasonable number of trees on the site that won't compromise their long-term health, and then do those on site. And then if there's some additional that can be done off site, we work with them on, we had the emerald ash borer affect some of the street trees. So in the past, we've had some people replace some of those, or in a park where some things have come down. So we're willing to work with them on that. But this is an unusual case, and we don't want to, we try not to punish those who just clear cut before the trees get too big, because you can, like in this case, there are 99 inches of trees that end up being saved if they had just clear cut the whole site before they get to 6 inches, then you have nothing. So we like to not penalize when that happens, but this is just an extraordinary number.
Do we have a good sense as to how many trees are being removed from the easements that are on the edge of the property now?
In general, based on what's in the easements, those likely are not being impacted, so those would remain. They're not allowed to put new construction within those areas because of the easements. So as you can see, there's a cluster, primarily along here that would be maintained as part of the development.
I didn't see that. Where?
On the backside of the pond, as well as there are a few along these easements on the side property lines. But unfortunately, a majority of those are right in the center of the site where, you'd have to develop.
Yeah, I think there's no question, the center of the site has to be cleared. It's unreasonable to do that. But where there's spots where there are easements where we can't plant trees, my question is, can we leave what's there?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what's being proposed, and that's why we have the condition in there in terms of having, preservation zones, during construction to make sure that they're maintaining those areas and not tearing those out.
So all the trees that are in the triple digits there, all those are going to be clear cut and removed. That's the way I understood you.
Correct.
That's fine. And they're just basically volunteer trees anyway, right? They're just, no one planted those intentionally, they just grew up.
Yeah, I would
That's
say
what we would expect.
for the most part, yes. It hasn't been developed since this was platted in '78, so it's basically just grown on its own over that time.
Would the applicant like to address the board? Okay. You don't have to, but you're welcome to. Yeah. Please state your name. Please state your name and address.
Leland Vogel, 5405 Red Bank Road, Galena, Ohio. Thank you for the consideration. When we were in Planning Commission last week, I think everybody was pretty excited to see a tree survey with this many trees on it. It's got a little bit of a laugh, so I'm glad to see the similar reception here. I would just say we are, it's always wonderful working with John and Carson. We are doing our best to try to engage with the spirit of the code here while also not hindering our ability to develop the site with 2,400 inches of potentially required replacement. So.
Okay, any questions for the applicant?
Out of the 75 trees that are listed in the variance request, have any idea on how many can be placed on-site versus off-site?
Yes, kind of. So what I drew had, close to 80, and the arborist just said that is not going to work. I think we might be able to get about 50 or 60 on site. We need to, they're too close together here for them to safely grow and expand.
So the plan that we're looking at just shows new tree plantings, not what existing ones are going to remain.
That's right. There is an attachment that shows some existing conditions later on in this packet, I believe. That was a part of the full submission packet with the Planning Commission, but it has all of them on there. So nothing highlighting just which ones are going to remain.
So we don't have a drawing showing what trees we're going to keep.
No.
Can you describe what trees we're going to keep?
Yeah, I can. It would actually be easiest to show you if I can.
I can go for a walk. Well, I mean, even just on what's on the screen, I mean, just to go through and just say, I mean, this area we're going to keep.
Broad strokes, everything that follows this side, you have, look at number 12 and 16, 19, 20 up along the edge there. Everything there is certainly to stay. There's a couple others within there that are going to stay as well. We're getting, like number 1 will stay.
Okay.
But 4, 3, 5, 24, 6, those.
So all of this.
7:30, that's all goes.
Those.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, what about down here? Is there anything close?
Everything.
Everything's too far in.
Yeah, everything's gone on that one.
But there you're planting some new. Is that right? No, you're
No,
not.
because that's
The easement.
challenge is there's easement.
That's the
on all
easement.
four-
Okay.
4 of the 5 sides of the site.
Okay. Thank you. That was very helpful for me. Thank you.
All right, would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion. Case number 2, BZA 23-7 Weaver Flex Park to grant a variance from Hilliard Code Section 112504I to reduce the number required replacement tree caliper inches with the 6 staff recommendations.
I'll second.
Mr. Epling?
Yes.
Mr. Donato?
Yes.
Mr. Piper?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. St. Clair?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Steep?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0, or 7-0, apologize.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like some of those black walnuts that,
Just go get them yourself. Thank you. Are there any communications from the staff? Okay. I'm just going to adjourn. I don't think we need to move to adjourn. Let's just adjourn. All right. Yeah, opposed, say.
Are we meeting next month? We got cases next month.
Yeah, and I apologize to everybody. No, that's more fine. Hopefully, that's the longest meeting.
No cases
I ever
next
have.
month?